Have you ever looked a toxic manager dead in the eye while they try to destroy your life over $5? I didn't scream or cry, knowing I held the exact evidence to send her to prison for $3,000 in corporate fraud. I just smiled. I signed her pathetic write-up and watched my boss dig a grave she could never climb out of. Pull up a chair. Revenge is best served with an undeniable paper trail. Welcome back to Boss Revenge Stories. Sadly, YouTube recently demonetized our channel, leaving us with zero budget to keep the lights on. If you enjoyed today's story, please consider supporting us with just $1 so we can pay our hardworking staff to cover their living expenses and keep creating content for you. You can support us by scanning the QR code on your screen or by clicking the donate link in the description or comments below. Now, let me introduce myself. My name is Leah Martin. I am 32 years old, and my back aches with the kind of deep, chronic pain that comes from leaning over a soldering station for a decade straight. I worked at Aero Circuit Restoration and Tech, a cramped, dimly lit shop buried in a gray, rain-soaked corner of Seattle. We did not fix cell phones or swap out modern laptop batteries. We dealt in the ghosts of technology past. We restored vintage soundboards, resurrected dead analog synthesizers, and brought early-generation computer components back to life. The shop smelled permanently of ozone, stale coffee, and burning rosin flux. It was a gritty, blue-collar sanctuary. The floorboards creaked beneath worn-out boots, and the air was thick with the quiet dignity of hard, honest labor. For a very long time, it was my home. That sanctuary shattered the day corporate decided we needed new management. Enter Valerie. She was transferred in as our new district manager, and from the moment her shiny designer heels clicked against our scuffed linoleum floor, I knew we were in serious trouble. Valerie was a power addict, obsessed with optics, corporate jargon, and her own reflection. She wore crisp, tailored suits that looked absurd in an environment coated in metallic dust and machine grease. Worse, she did not know a single thing about electronics. She could not tell a capacitor from a resistor if her life depended on it. Yet, she demanded absolute submission. She was the kind of toxic micromanager who would interrupt a delicate, microscopic trace repair to lecture you about the font size on a daily work order. Her arrogance was suffocating, poisoning the air of the shop day by day. The incident that finally lit the match happened on a frantic Tuesday afternoon. We had a major crisis on our hands with a very important VIP client. A high-profile recording studio needed a rare amplifier board repaired by 5 o'clock, or they would lose thousands of dollars in booked studio time. My hands were shaking as I worked against the clock. The heatsink needed immediate reseating, and my personal bench stash of thermal paste was completely dry. I bolted out to the retail shelf, grabbed a basic, generic tube of thermal compound worth exactly $5, and rushed back to the bench. In the absolute chaos of saving the company's reputation and completing the emergency repair on time, I failed to scan the barcode into our inventory system. It was a simple, honest oversight, one that I fully planned to fix the very second the board was securely out the door. Valerie saw her moment to assert dominance. She did not pull me aside. She did not ask for context in the privacy of the back room. Instead, she marched right out onto the main floor. The shop was busy. Regular customers were browsing the aisles, and our 2 young interns were organizing thick cables near the cash register. Valerie stood right behind my bench, inhaled deeply, and began to scream. "Leah," she yelled, her voice piercing the low hum of the workshop like a knife. "Are you in the habit of stealing from this company?" I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs. I turned around, still holding the half-empty tube. I tried to explain that it was for the emergency VIP repair, that I was going to log it into the system momentarily, but she cut me off before I could finish a single sentence. "You are a thief," she shrieked, her face twisting with self-righteous fury, making absolutely sure every single person in the room could hear her. "You took merchandise without paying or logging it. This is theft. I do not care if it is $5 or $500. You are stealing from Aero Circuit." She turned a $5 tube of goop into a massive, unforgivable crime. She deliberately stripped away my dignity in front of the kids I had spent months training and the loyal clients I had served for years. The silence that followed her outburst was deafening. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in the cramped back office, the heavy scent of her expensive floral perfume physically suffocating me. She slid a formal disciplinary action form across the desk. It was written in harsh, humiliating language, explicitly detailing my theft and warning that any further infractions would result in immediate termination. I felt a hot, burning pressure expanding in my chest. Everything inside me screamed to throw my heavy metal tools across the room, to quit on the spot, to violently defend the decade of loyalty and blood I had given this company. But I needed this job. I needed the meager paycheck just to survive rent in this expensive city. So, I swallowed the bitter taste of bile. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice or shed a single tear. I took a cheap blue pen, signed my name on the dotted line, and pushed the paper back to her. Valerie smiled a tight, triumphant little smile, completely unaware of the absolute monster she had just created. I walked back out to my workstation. The shop remained dead quiet. The interns were nervously avoiding my gaze, pretending to be busy with brooms. I sat down heavily in my creaking chair and stared blankly at my workstation monitor, which had gone to sleep, in the dark, glossy reflection of the blank screen. I saw my own face. I looked incredibly tired. I looked worn down and defeated. But as I stared deeply into my own dark eyes, the humiliation slowly burned away, leaving behind nothing but cold, absolute clarity. I was completely done being the punching bag for an incompetent tyrant. I was not going to be a victim ever again. The rules of engagement had just changed, and the game had officially begun. The punishment was swift and calculated. Valerie cut my weekly schedule down by 15 hours. I went from 40 hours of solid bench work to barely 25. Worse than the financial hit was the exile. She banished me from the back workshop, my soldering irons, my magnifying lamps, my familiar smells of melting metal were all replaced by the sterile, cold surface of the front reception counter. She wanted me isolated from the inventory, cut off from the heart of the shop. She thought putting me at the front door would break my spirit, but from the reception desk, I had a clear, unobstructed view of the hallway leading to the back room. I became a ghost in my own shop, watching the shadows stretch across the floor as the days bled into the bitter Seattle winter. The neon sign in the window buzzed with a low, dying hum, casting a harsh blue light across my face. I stood there for 8 hours a day, greeting customers with a hollow smile, while keeping my eyes fixed on the reflections in the glass doors. That was when I noticed the pattern. Valerie was a creature of strict, lazy corporate habit. She never arrived before 9 in the morning, and she always left exactly at 5 in the afternoon. Except on Thursdays. On Thursdays, she stayed late. I would mop the floors in the fading light, dragging the wet cotton across the linoleum, pretending not to watch her. She would wheel the heavy gray utility cart out from the secure storage cage. On it were heavy cardboard boxes. She handled them with a strange, frantic energy. Using a thick black marker, she wrote the same words on every single box. Electronic waste for disposal. E-waste. A district manager whose hands were usually too delicate to touch a dusty keyboard was suddenly doing heavy lifting in the twilight hours. The masking tape screeched as she sealed them shut, the sound echoing off the bare walls of the empty shop. One evening, she left a box unattended by the loading dock while she took a phone call in her office. The tape was not fully pressed down. I slipped into the back hallway, my sneakers making absolutely no sound on the concrete floor. I lifted the cardboard flap just enough to peek inside. My breath caught in my throat. This was not garbage. Inside the box rested a pristine, original condition vintage graphics card from the late 90s, wrapped carefully in anti-static bubble wrap. Beneath it, I spotted the distinct silver caps of classic vacuum amplifier tubes. These were parts that audiophiles and collectors hunted down like treasure. The graphics card alone could easily fetch $400 on the secondary market. The vacuum tubes were worth at least another $200. Why would a company throw away pure gold? They would not. Someone was skimming the cream right off the top. The confirmation came 2 days later, courtesy of our newest intern, Toby. He was a bright-eyed 19-year-old kid who still believed in the goodness of corporate ladders. It was a Tuesday morning, right after the scheduled trash collection. Toby walked into the main shop holding the daily disposal manifest. He looked confused, scratching the back of his neck. Valerie was sipping her expensive latte near the register. "Hey, Valerie," Toby said, his voice completely innocent. "I was just doing the weekly weight check for the environmental compliance log. The ledger says we tossed out over 40 pounds of e-waste yesterday, but when I took the regular trash out back, the heavy disposal dumpster was totally empty. Did the truck come early?" The temperature in the room instantly plummeted. Valerie stopped sipping her coffee. The plastic cup crunched slightly in her grip. She turned to Toby, her eyes narrowing into cold, reptilian slits. "Are you questioning my inventory management, Toby?" she asked, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "No, ma'am," Toby stammered, taking a quick step backward. "I just wanted to make sure the logbook was right." "The logbook is accurate," Valerie snapped, stepping directly into his personal space. "Your job is to sweep the floors and sort cables, not to play auditor. If you ever question my paperwork again, you will be looking for a new internship by noon. Do you understand me?" "Yes, ma'am," Toby whispered, quickly retreating to the back room. I watched the entire exchange from the corner of my eye. I kept my head down, organizing a stack of business cards. But my mind was racing. 40 pounds of non-existent trash. The dumpster was empty because those boxes never made it to the garbage truck. The hunt was on. I could not just confront her. I needed an ironclad paper trail. I became a creature of pure calculation. I memorized her biological clock, every day, exactly at 10:15 in the morning and 2:45 in the afternoon. Valerie took a strict 15-minute bathroom break to touch up her makeup. The moment the bathroom door clicked shut, my stopwatch started. I would slip behind the main counter, slide open the top drawer of her desk, and pull out the master inventory ledger. My hands never shook. I moved with the precision of a surgeon. I pulled out my smartphone and snapped high-resolution photos of every single page containing items marked as damaged, destroyed, or disposed of. I made sure the lighting was perfect so every letter and number was legible. But photos of logs were not enough. I needed the hardware identities. When Valerie was busy berating customers on the phone, I would slip into the secondary holding cage. I found the components she had secretly tagged for Thursday disposal. With a small notebook hidden in the palm of my hand, I quickly scribbled down the unique serial numbers etched into the green fiberglass of the circuit boards and the stamped codes on the metal casings of the vacuum tubes. I became a shadow, living in the blind spots of her arrogance. Every serial number I copied, every photograph I saved to my encrypted cloud drive, was a bullet being loaded into a chamber. I watched her parade around the shop, acting like a queen ruling over her peasants, completely oblivious to the fact that the quiet girl at the reception desk was quietly building the guillotine. The physical world was too risky. I needed digital proof. Years ago, when I first started at AeroCircuit, our network kept crashing. To save myself from driving into the shop at 2 in the morning every time the server choked, I built a hidden administrative backdoor. It was a simple, encrypted tunnel. Management never knew about it. Now, it was my greatest weapon. I waited until midnight. Sitting in my cramped apartment, I opened my personal laptop. The screen cast a harsh white glow across my dark living room. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I bypassed the main firewall in less than 30 seconds. I dropped straight into the company network. I ignored the main servers and went directly for the shipping logs. Corporate used FedEx for all outgoing parts. I pulled up the master shipping manifest and cross-referenced the dates Valerie stayed late. Bingo. Every single Thursday evening, a package was logged. The weights matched perfectly with the missing boxes of high-value parts. The shipping labels were paid for using the company account. I traced the destination. They were not going to an environmental recycling plant. Every single box was shipped directly to a private, Anonymous post office box in Portland, Oregon. She was stealing the hardware and making the company pay for the shipping. But where was the money coming from? You do not steal vintage hardware just to hoard it in another state. You sell it. I opened a new browser tab. I went straight to eBay. I started searching for the exact models of the missing inventory. I started with the vintage graphics card. I typed in the specific model number. Hundreds of results popped up. I filtered the search by location, narrowing it down to the Pacific Northwest. Then, I filtered by recent sales. There it was. An active auction. Ending in exactly 2 hours, the current bid was already sitting at $450. I clicked on the listing. The seller had uploaded 6 high-resolution photos. I zoomed in on the 4th picture. It was a close-up of the circuit board. My heart hammered against my ribs. There, clearly visible on the green fiberglass, was the exact same serial number I had scribbled down on my palm 3 days ago. I clicked on the seller profile. The account was highly active. I scrolled through the completed sales history. It was a goldmine of stolen aero circuit property. Vintage vacuum tubes sold for $300 a pair. Rare soundboards auctioned for $800 each. I did the math in my head. She was clearing over $3,000 a week, tax-free, pure profit. I started taking screenshots. I captured the serial numbers, the auction bids, the seller profile, and the FedEx tracking numbers. I was building a digital fortress of evidence. But then, I made a tiny mistake. My remote connection dropped for a fraction of a second. The system automatically reconnected, but it triggered a minor security protocol. An automated login alert was sent directly to the district manager's email. The next morning, the atmosphere in the shop was electric with tension. Valerie walked in looking like she had not slept. Her perfectly ironed suit looked slightly rumpled. Her eyes were darting around the room. She knew someone was inside the network. Paranoia took over. By noon, she came back from a local hardware store carrying 4 plastic boxes. They were fake security cameras. They ran on AA batteries and had a stupid, blinking red LED light on the front. She mounted them herself, placing one directly pointing at the main server rack and another aiming straight at my reception desk. She wanted us to feel watched. She wanted to terrify whoever was snooping. I had to pivot. If she panicked and deleted the FedEx logs, my entire case would collapse. I needed a decoy. I needed to feed her a suspect. Enter Marcus. Marcus was our assistant manager. He was entirely useless. He spent 90% of his shift playing mobile games in the break room and never, ever locked his computer terminal when he walked away. He was the perfect scapegoat. During my lunch break, I walked past his empty desk. The monitor was glowing. He was logged in. I leaned over his keyboard. I moved fast. I opened his web browser history. I manually injected a direct link to the FedEx shipping portal. I opened a digital sticky note on his desktop and typed out one of the tracking numbers associated with her Portland post office box. Then, I minimized the window, leaving it hidden but active in his taskbar. I walked away before the fake camera above me even blinked twice. At 3 p.m, Valerie did exactly what I knew she would do. She did a surprise inspection of the office terminals. I watched from the front desk as she stood over Marcus's computer. I saw her hand freeze on the mouse. I saw her shoulders stiffen. She maximized the hidden window. She saw the tracking number. Her head snapped up. She glared at Marcus, who was oblivious, eating a bag of chips in the corner. The paranoia in her eyes shifted into pure, targeted rage. She took the bait hook, line, and sinker. Valerie spent the rest of the week locking down Marcus's permissions, breathing down his neck, and interrogating him about his daily tasks. She was completely distracted. She thought she had found the mole. She was so busy hunting the wrong person that she never noticed the reception clerk quietly finalizing a heavily encrypted, meticulously organized digital dossier. The file was getting larger by the hour. The trap was set. Now, I just needed her to walk right into it. The decoy with Marcus bought me exactly 4 days of breathing room. But paranoia is a living, breathing creature. It does not just stop, it mutates. Valerie soon realized Marcus was too lazy to pull off a sophisticated network breach. He could barely remember his own email password, let alone navigate a hidden directory. Her suspicion inevitably swung back to her favorite target. She needed someone fired, immediately, to establish total dominance and distract corporate from her own missing inventory. Since she had already branded me a thief over a $5 tube of thermal paste, I was the perfect candidate for a sequel. She was going to frame me for a major theft, call the police, and have me escorted out in handcuffs. It would permanently ruin my career, but it would perfectly cover her tracks. But I knew her game. When you work with predatory managers, you develop a sixth sense for retaliation. The air in the shop felt heavier. Valerie was overly polite to me on Monday morning, asking me about my weekend with a terrifying plastic smile. That was the tell. My locker number 7, was located in the narrow, windowless hallway near the employee break room. The locking mechanism was old, a standard combination dial that could easily be bypassed with the manager's master key. So, the previous weekend, I had taken a trip to a local auto parts store. I paid cash for a tiny, wide-angle dashboard camera and a high-capacity portable power bank. On Monday morning, before anyone else arrived, I mounted the camera against the dark metal ceiling of my locker, pointing straight down into the main compartment. I covered the blinking recording light with a piece of black electrical tape. It recorded continuously in crisp, high-definition video. I was literally waiting for the rat to crawl into the trap. Wednesday morning at 10:30, I took my scheduled 15-minute break. I slipped into the locker room, unlocked my door, and carefully pulled out the micro memory card from the camera. I slid it into my phone. I scrubbed through the morning footage. For the first 2 hours, nothing but darkness. Then, at exactly 9:45, the locker door swung open. The harsh fluorescent light of the hallway flooded the frame. There she was. Valerie's perfectly manicured hands reached into the view. She was breathing heavily, her chest rising and falling with nervous, adrenaline-fueled excitement. She held a pristine, vintage analog soundboard. Retail value exactly $400. I watched in cold fascination as she unzipped my faded green canvas backpack, shoved the circuit board deep into the main compartment, and quickly zipped it back up. The locker door slammed shut, plunging the video back into darkness. A normal person would have panicked. A normal person would have immediately run to human resources, but human resources exist to protect the company, not the employee. If I reported it then, it would be my word against the district managers. I needed to humiliate her. I needed to break her psychologically. During my lunch break at exactly noon, I walked back to my locker. I took the $400 soundboard out of my bag. I wrapped it securely in an anti-static bag and quietly returned it to its exact proper place in the secure inventory cage. Then, I went to the shipping station. I cut out a perfectly square piece of thick corrugated cardboard, roughly the same size and weight as the circuit board. I grabbed a thick black permanent marker. Right in the center of the cardboard, I drew a detailed, highly expressive picture of a hand flipping the middle finger. Underneath it, I wrote 3 simple words in bold. Block letters. Keep trying. Valerie. I placed the cardboard square deep inside my backpack and zipped it shut. Then, I went back to the front reception desk, smiled at the next customer, and waited for the axe to fall. The climax arrived at exactly 4:45 in the afternoon. The shop was winding down for the day. Suddenly, the heavy glass doors swung open, and the building's head security guard, a massive man named Greg, walked in. Valerie stepped out of her office, her face glowing with false authority. She clapped her hands loudly, demanding the attention of every single employee in the building. Toby, Marcus, and the other technicians gathered around the front counter. "Attention, everyone," Valerie announced, her voice dripping with artificial regret. "Corporate has noticed some severe discrepancies in our high-value inventory. Because we have recently dealt with issues of internal theft, I am instituting an immediate mandatory locker inspection. Greg is here to ensure total transparency. We will start with the front desk staff. She turned her gaze directly to me. Her eyes were burning with triumphant malice. She thought she was about to end my life. I did not flinch. I did not protest. I simply nodded, picked up my keys, and led the entire group down the narrow hallway to locker number 7. "Open it," Valerie commanded, crossing her arms over her chest. I spun the combination dial. The metal latch clicked. I pulled the door open. My worn-out green backpack sat right where I had left it. "Step back, Leah," she ordered. "I will conduct the search." I took a step back, leaning against the opposite wall. The entire staff watched in dead silence. Valerie stepped forward. Her breathing was shallow. She reached out, grabbed the zipper of my backpack, and pulled it open. She plunged her hand deep inside, exactly where she had hidden the soundboard hours earlier. Her fingers grasped the thick, heavy square. She yanked it out in one swift, dramatic motion, ready to present the stolen merchandise to the crowd. She held the piece of cardboard up in the air. The giant, black marker drawing of the middle finger stared right back at her. Below it, the words, "Keep trying, Valerie," were completely visible to everyone in the room. The silence in that narrow hallway was absolute. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. I watched the blood completely drain from Valerie's face. Her tan complexion turned a sickly, translucent shade of gray. A cold sweat broke out across her forehead. Her jaw dropped open, but no sound came out. She was trapped in a psychological prison of her own making. She could not scream. She could not accuse me of tampering. If she said a single word about expecting a circuit board, she would instantly confess to planting it there in the first place. She stood there, frozen, holding a cardboard middle finger in front of the entire staff and the security guard. I looked her dead in the eyes, tilted my head slightly, and offered her the most polite, chilling smile I could muster. "Is everything okay, Valerie?" I asked softly. "Did you find what you were looking for?" She dropped the cardboard as if it were on fire. She turned around, pushed past the security guard, and practically ran back to her office, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled in its frame. The game was no longer a secret. It was a war, and she had just lost the most important battle. The locker incident was a psychological strike, but I knew it would trigger a massive cleanup. Valerie was terrified, which meant she was extremely dangerous. The moment she realized I knew about the planted soundboard, she would naturally assume I knew everything else. I had maybe 48 hours before she started permanently scrubbing the network servers and burning the physical shipping logs. I did not wait. That same night, sitting in the cold glow of my apartment desk lamp, I compiled the ultimate digital execution package. I gathered the high-definition locker video, the corresponding FedEx tracking numbers, the eBay auction screenshots, and the side-by-side comparisons of the altered inventory ledgers. The total missing inventory amounted to over $3,000. I transferred every single byte of data onto a high-security, hardware-encrypted USB flash drive. I pulled it from my computer and hung it around my neck on a heavy silver chain. The evidence was literally resting against my heartbeat. Now, I needed a delivery method. The standard protocol was to file a report with Human Resources. But anyone who has worked in corporate America for more than 5 minutes knows that Human Resources is not your friend. Their sole purpose is to protect management from liability. If I went to them, they would tip Valerie off, bury the evidence, and find a legal loophole to fire me for insubordination. I needed someone who cared more about the bottom line than corporate politics. I needed Elias. He was the eccentric, notoriously ruthless founder of AeroCircuit's parent company. He was an old-school engineer who built the empire out of a damp garage in the late 80s. He absolutely despised corporate thieves. Using a secure, encrypted proxy network, I created a temporary email address. I did not send him the entire package. I just sent a taste. I attached one single screenshot of an active eBay auction, placed right next to a scanned copy of Valerie's forged disposal log, and a FedEx receipt linking the company account to the Portland post office box. In the body of the email, I wrote exactly 2 sentences. Your Seattle district manager is actively fencing high-value vintage components. I suggest you audit the Thursday e-waste logs. I hit send, deleted the email account, and went to sleep like a baby. For 3 days, there was absolute silence. It was the eerie, suffocating calm before a hurricane makes landfall. Valerie, completely unaware of the digital bomb ticking under her desk, convinced herself she had won the psychological war. Since I had not run crying to management about the locker, she assumed I was simply too scared to fight back. Her confidence returned with a vengeance. On Friday morning, she called a mandatory all-staff meeting before the shop opened. She stood at the front of the room, wearing a brand-new tailored charcoal suit, radiating blind arrogance. "Team," she began, clasping her hands together with an overly dramatic smile. "I am thrilled to announce that corporate has officially nominated me for District Manager of the Year." Marcus clapped loudly. Toby looked down at his shoes. I just stared at her, my face a blank mask. "Because of this honor," Valerie continued, pacing back and forth. "We need to ensure our facility reflects my leadership. We have a routine corporate inspection scheduled for the middle of next month. I want this entire shop scrubbed from top to bottom, every cable sorted, every bench wiped down. We have 4 weeks to make this place look perfect." She was practically glowing with self-importance, but right in the middle of her speech, the heavy glass doors at the front of the shop swung open. It was exactly 8:30 in the morning. We were not open to the public yet. 3 people walked in. They were not customers looking for vintage repairs. They were 2 men and 1 woman, all dressed in immaculate, dark navy suits, carrying heavy, secure briefcases. The air in the room instantly dropped 10 degrees. Valerie stopped mid-sentence. Her professional mask slipped for a fraction of a second before she forced it back into place. She assumed they were a regional scouting team, maybe arriving a few weeks early to check on the nominee. She walked forward, extending her hand with that fake, glossy smile. "Welcome to Seattle," Valerie said, her voice dripping with artificial warmth. "I am Valerie, the district manager. We were not expecting you until next month, but please, let me show you to my office. Give me 5 minutes to prepare the ledgers, and I will bring you all some fresh coffee." The lead auditor, a tall woman with steel gray hair and eyes like chipped ice, did not take Valerie's hand. She did not even blink. She simply looked past Valerie, scanning the room and the front reception desk. "There will be no coffee," Valerie, the lead auditor said, her voice completely devoid of emotion. "And we are not going to your office. We are locking down the system right now. Everyone, step away from your computers." The auditors did not waste a single second. While the lead auditor commandeered the main terminal to lock down the entire digital network, her 2 partners marched straight into the secure inventory cage in the back room. They moved with a terrifying mechanical efficiency, bypassing Valerie entirely. For exactly 45 minutes, the shop was dead silent except for the frantic clicking of keyboards and the heavy rustling of thick paper ledgers. Then, the lead auditor walked out of the cage. She held a stack of Thursday disposal logs in one hand and the master inventory manifest in the other. She laid them out on the main counter right in front of Valerie. The discrepancy was glaringly obvious. Thousands of dollars in rare, high-value components were completely unaccounted for. Valerie broke instantly. Her confident, arrogant posture crumbled like a dry leaf. Genuine panic flooded her eyes, and within seconds, she burst into loud, theatrical tears. She hyperventilated, looking wildly around the room until her eyes locked directly onto me. "It is her," Valerie screamed, pointing a trembling finger directly at my face. Her voice echoed harshly off the concrete walls. "It is Leah. She is a thief. I even have a formal disciplinary write-up on file from last month when I caught her stealing store merchandise. She is the one doing this. She is sabotaging my store to get revenge because I disciplined her." I did not scream back. I did not flinch. I did not even look at her. I calmly reached up to the back of my neck and unclasped the heavy silver chain. I walked out from behind the reception desk, my footsteps steady and deliberate, cutting through her hysterical sobbing. I approached the lead auditor and placed the heavy, hardware-encrypted USB drive directly on top of the forged ledgers. Next to it, I dropped a thick, cleanly bound manila folder containing every single printed screenshot. "Here is the complete digital shipping log," I said, my voice completely flat and unwavering. "This folder contains the hidden camera security footage, the matched FedEx tracking numbers, and the hardware serial numbers perfectly matching Valerie's personal, anonymous eBay account. The total stolen value is exactly $3,200. The lead auditor looked at me, then picked up the USB drive. She plugged it into her secure laptop and decrypted the folder. She opened the main video file and deliberately turned the laptop screen around so the entire room could see it. The crisp, high-definition footage played flawlessly. Everyone in the shop, including the two massive security guards who had just walked in to assist the auditors, watched Valerie secretly unlock my locker and shove a $400 soundboard into my backpack. The sound of Valerie's own nervous gasps on the recording filled the quiet shop. When the video finished, Valerie completely collapsed. The final shred of her professional sanity evaporated into thin air. She threw her hands over her head and began shrieking uncontrollably, completely losing her mind right there on the scuffed linoleum floor. She kicked a plastic trash can across the room, screaming vicious obscenities at the auditors, at the parent company, and at me. It was the ultimate, pathetic temper tantrum of a cornered predator realizing it was actually the prey. The two security guards immediately stepped forward, grabbed her firmly by both arms, and dragged her toward the front doors. She was escorted out of the building in absolute humiliating disgrace, her designer suit wrinkled and her reputation permanently destroyed. The very next morning, the atmosphere at Aero Circuit was entirely different. A senior corporate representative flew in overnight and immediately called me into the back office. The tone had shifted completely from aggressive management to desperate damage control. The representative apologized profusely, practically begging for my forgiveness, to keep me quiet and prevent a massive wrongful termination and defamation lawsuit. They slid a brand new contract across the desk. They officially offered me a promotion to become the new district manager, replacing Valerie, complete with double my previous salary. It was everything I used to want. It was the ultimate vindication after years of breaking my back over a soldering iron. But as I looked at the shiny corporate letterhead, I felt absolutely nothing but exhaustion and deep clarity. I smiled, genuinely and peacefully. I reached down to the hem of my faded Aero Circuit uniform polo shirt, pulled it over my head, and dropped it right on top of the lucrative contract. I tossed my heavy ring of master store keys right beside it, the metal clattering loudly against the wooden desk. "Thank you," I said, looking the corporate representative dead in the eye. "But I do not work for a company that waits until an employee has to become a private detective to finally believe them." I turned around and walked out of the office. I did not look back at the worn-out workbenches. I did not look back at the reception desk where I had plotted my war. I pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped out onto the gray, damp pavement. I tipped my head back, letting the cold, characteristic Seattle rain wash over my face. I took a massive, deep breath of pure freedom. I left the shattered mess of that toxic company exactly where it belonged, entirely behind me. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please let me know your city or country in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and felt the sweet satisfaction of corporate justice, please consider supporting our channel with just $1. Your small donation helps us pay our amazing staff so they can feed their families and continue bringing you the best revenge stories every single week. You can scan the QR code right here on the screen, or click the donation link in the description or the pinned comment. Stay strong out there, and never let anyone treat you like you are worth less than you are.